sometimes one of my challenges I do for myself is like I like a piece a lot, but it doesn't fit my personality. So I have two ways of doing it. I can either not do it because it doesn't fit at all, or I can find a not too convoluted explanation for why I'm using that. So, for example, a piece I recently added to my repertoire of main pieces, which was shown to me by Peter Samuelson. So, how do I justify for a Vince Wilson show? So, we're going to flip through this, and everything you think you say is something everything you think you see is something that I say you saw, even if you didn't see what you think you saw. Does that make sense? And they'll say no. If you I said, yeah, good. If you said yes, I'd be worried. And I flipped through the magazine and I say the first image is of a woman who's experiencing the opposite of what the words say. I just want you to focus on the top of the advertisements in here. The first thing you see is the opposite of what the words say the woman is experiencing. And she looks frazzled and it says, I am so delighted, and the audience, of course, is seeing something completely different because she has been mesmerized by the power of glamour.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Desert Island Tricks. I'm incredibly excited for today's guest. Today's guest is someone that I met earlier on this year at the East Coast Spirit Sessions at Myrtle Beach in America, which is a bizarre magic small convention, I guess is the best way of putting it. And when I was there, I got to meet some incredible people, but I'd actually been talking to today's guest for a little while before because I'd come across his book. Now, his book I had seen pictures of everywhere on my Facebook feed from any kind of bizarrist and quite a few mentalists as well. His book is Bizarre Magic. And from that point on, I started looking into his background and I discovered that he actually owns the Pose Magic Theater in Baltimore. And this is where they do the Pose Magic Conference every year in April, just coming up actually at the time of recording. And hopefully one day I'll get out there as well to see it. Now, when we were over there, Vince is a much loved bizarrist, mentalist, and performer in America. And if you haven't heard of him, then number one, I really hope this podcast makes you intrigued and gets you to search out about Vince and find out more about him. But more than that, I hope that people hear the passion and the knowledge that Vince has. It's quite clear when you talk to Vince, he really does have a strong love for our art. He thinks deeply about it as well. And I know that this is going to be such an incredible episode. I'm really excited for all of you to hear from him. He is, of course, the wonderful Vince Wilson.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, so those were very wonderful words you spoke about me. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Some of them might actually be true. Yeah.
But he didn't tell me about your interesting background choices.
Yes, yeah. So it was I uh was into the paranormal and supernatural for quite a bit of my life. In fact, it was even a paranormal investigator and certified parapsychologist at one point, having been those sorts of uh, efforts had got me on multiple international TV shows and channels and things like that. Um, I didn't stay in that uh, field, for lack of a better term, for very long, because with the advent of TV shows, thanks to the no doubt thanks to, in part to this had that's starting in the UK, I believe, was the first paranormal TV shows that were a regular reality TV phenomenon. Um, I got out of it because it became a cesspool of toxicity and conspiracy theories and mixing faith with pseudoscientific mumbo jumbo. And I became more skeptical as I delved more into magic, and specifically theatrical storytelling. So yes, I guess that is an interesting background to some degree. Yeah.
So what do you describe yourself as a performer? Are you a bizarrist, a storyteller, a mentalist?
Oh, bizarrest first, I think. But I would also say that and then storytelling, theatrical storytelling magician, for lack of a better term. Bizarre automatically conjures aspects of skulls and, and candles and the occult and the arcane and things like that. It doesn't have to, though. Bizarre, I think, has a lot to teach any magician um, about power of narrative structure, storytelling, and things along those lines. And in fact, I would argue that the greats of the golden age of magic, which we all have those posters in our walls, the Thurston Keller, Blackstone, the Font, et cetera. Um, they were bizarre magicians. They were bizarre magicians more than they were mainstream magicians, more than they were, uh, you know, uh, what we would call a magician today. All right, the floating heads and references to demonology and the occult were often in those grand spectacles of yesteryear, and a lot of magicians have forgotten that. The metaphor, storytelling will connect with audiences more than tricks do. Most magic these days are tricks strung together in a loosely coherent way, as opposed to a structure that makes sense. And although that can be very entertaining, don't get me wrong. Um, what bizarre magic teaches magicians is what happens when they leave the venue. Because most magic is in the now. When you do your magic tricks, your card tricks, sponge balls, linking rings, no matter how spectacular they are, and what kind of standing ovation you get at the end of your show, when they walk out the back door, they're being hit in the face with reality. They're being smacked, you know, right away with real life. The artificial universe you created in that venue is quickly fading away into oblivion with the reality of kids and work and in school and such. The argument you had yesterday, the death in the family, all these sorts of things are fighting for control of the memories they have of what you performed. If you can counteract that to a degree with emotional connections, narrative structure, metaphors have the most powerful way to connect with an audience. That emotional connection you create with them, is what makes them remember. And that's what bizarre magic offers magicians. Even if you're not into the spooky stuff, you don't have to be. You can, but the aspect of storytelling is important, and not enough magicians recognize that today.
Yeah, I agree. And how did the Pose Magic Theater come about? How did that manifest itself?
Well, obviously, it's named after Edgar Allan Poe, the great American writer and poet, who's actually buried in Baltimore City, only 2 blocks away from the hotel where the theater is located at. It came about because I wanted to bring magic back to my hometown, which is Baltimore City. Okay, it is a often underappreciated and profiled town in Baltimore City, in the United States, Baltimore City is, and I wanted to bring magic to the heart of that magic that gives opportunities to other magicians. I mean, here's another great magic venue in Baltimore, but the that is a venue for a specific magician, and they're doing a great job there. But I want to give opportunities to other magicians to perform and get their names out in Baltimore City. Besides myself, I didn't want to be a vanity project for Vince Wilson. I want to give opportunities to other magicians with a focus on storytelling. Now, do I have magicians who are just mainstream magicians? Yes, and I shouldn't have said it like that because there's not less mainstream magicians. I'm not trying to say that bizarre magic is inherently better, but I think magic is inherently better when it has meaning behind it.
So, in terms of this list that you put together, is it inherently bizarre magic, or have you gone for a range of different things?
I go for a range of different things. For myself, the Eugene Berger's a big influence on me, of course. But also a even uh bigger name in that is historically speaking would be Tony Andruzzi. Uh he was a major influence on my style of performance, the dramatic flair I try to put into every performance I do, and how I articulate the scripts I perform on stage, the verbiage and patter I use. You know the the storytelling magicians are definitely those who have influenced me the most. I definitely read the about those golden age magicians and how they perform. I don't think I would play today because those shows were 3 to 4 hours long. It was an orchestra pit and an MC that would come out and an intermission for drinks and hors d'oeuvres, and then you would come back into the opera house and see more magic. But the I do think the most successful magicians and the most well-known magicians, they have found that alchemical combination of performance styles, for lack of a better term, that has elevated them to the level they are at through because they understand that aspect of meaning, whether they are forming mentalism, uh, or like Aaron Brown, for example, or they are doing storytelling like Larry Haas or Eugene Berger.
Okay, well, that excites me. Let's get into it then. So, if this is your first time listening, the idea is we're about to maroon Vince on his very own, probably quite spooky island. When he's there, he's allowed to take 8 tricks, banish one item, take one book, and one non magic item that he uses for magic. Particulars, who's there, what's there, how many skeletons are going to be there. It's all down to Vince. So, let's go to your island now, Vince, and find out what you put in your first position.
Oh, I would definitely open up with my Okito doll routine. Okay, is in which I use Rolando Medina's Stickman, the best Okito doll on the market, in my opinion. And I tell a story. I say, um, "Have you ever heard of a town in Maryland, the United States, called Burkittsville? You never heard of Burkittsville, Maryland? See, it's where they filmed a movie called The Blair Witch Project." Yes,
Ah.
yes. And in the in the movie, they talk about a witch. I don't have to go over the plot, but I was driving past there on my way back from Virginia, and I came across a gravestone I had never seen before. As I walked, took my steps at the graveyard, as you do. I'm sure you do that as well, right? Yeah, you take a little stroll through the cemetery, and I came across a gravestone I've never seen before. It had a woman's name on it. I think it was an Irish name, a Lucy Fur is what it was. Lucy Fur? You never heard of Lucy Fur? No? Okay, never mind then. I understand she's quite famous. Anyway, on top Lucifer, get it? Lucifer, there we go, anyway. Yeah, so yep, so sometimes I'm too hip for the room. Anyway, I take on top of the gravestone was a wooden box. It had chrysanthemums carved at the top. As you know, chrysanthemums go back to ancient Greece. They ward off evil or contain it within. So I open it right up, obviously. And inside, I discovered this little wooden doll. I don't have it with me right now, but it's Rolando Medina's doll, and I open up with that for most of my shows, when they allow that to be a big discussion anyway. Um, it's a great little piece. It gets the, a lot of interaction from the audience, and I say this, like, "Does it remind you of a movie?" And they'll say, Blair Witch Project, because I just mentioned it. I said, "No, Toy Story, of course." The power of imagination makes the toy come to life, and you bring it to life, so.
Why did you go with that specific Akito doll? Is there a reason?
It has a great look. It's very lightweight, and it also a lot of other keto dolls have uh, the pin, which is how I think everyone listening knows how a keto doll works. The pin which you skewer yourself with, is right at a 90-degree angle from the foot, as opposed to most of them, which are slightly bent. It gives you a less um, vertical lift on the doll, okay, in the palm of the hand. This Rolando's goes straight up, and is very obvious, and you give it a little bow as well if you like. Um, and it's very forgiving when it comes to customization because it is a stick man. So if you wear dark clothing like I usually do, you can give it a little spray with a spray paint or something like that to lighten it up. This little dusting, or you can customize it with other colors. Recently I gave it a little bit of a glint with a semi-fluorescent paint. Just a little hint of it, so it'll illuminate more in lighting. That way it'll stand out from my dark clothing I wear. That was a complaint I had about it. But yeah, so the Akito doll is a great piece. Another piece I open up with, if we're talking about openers, is occasionally a effect called T, which was developed by Joseph Daniels, in which you do a T reading, and it connects to a member of the audience. Their initials appear in the teacup. Okay, but first you need a little bit of ash in order to maintain your concoction, and you burn a tea bag or flying papers, and it goes into the air. You catch it in the teacup. It's a very beautiful moment, and then what I did to enhance this was I added ashes to palm, but with tea leaves, in the cup. So when they open their hands up, there's a tea in the center of their palm. And I'll mention and I talk about my grandmother teaching me about psychic phenomena, which she did actually. She was into palm reading and tea leaves and tarot cards and things like that. And I mentioned that in my uh, routine. And what's great about these two particular pieces, whether I open up with the Okito doll or the key effect, is that it establishes everything the audience needs to know about me at the very beginning of the show. I can be funny, a little spooky, and uh, and we're going to have a great time, and no one's going to get hurt. Regardless of what the topics we talk about. So that's what these two pieces are great to open with for my particular types of shows, and I think everyone's opener should be something that establishes your personality at the very beginning. The way they know what they're getting in the journey ahead for the next hour or so.
So, would the tea trick be your second choice? Because you said a keto doll, and then you went into that as an open. Now, is that going to be a selection?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
we're going to keep the tea trick in there as well. So I'm going to write this officially into your list. So we've got this tea trick and we've got this Akito doll. Now, based on what you've told us so far, it almost sounds like you're putting together a performance.
That is correct. Yeah, because it makes sense together. Now, I like to have things that are sometimes one of my challenges I do for myself is like I like a piece a lot, but does it fit my personality? All right. So I have two ways of doing it. I can either not do it because it doesn't fit at all, or I can find a not too convoluted explanation for why I'm using that. Okay. So, for example, a piece I recently added to my repertoire of main pieces, which was shown to me by Peter Samuelson from New York. Uh, you know, he's been doing Chris Philpott's Odyssey. Okay, I always had an issue with Hunter's Monkey. One, because it doesn't really fit what I do. All right, at least it didn't. Initially, and also, it had too much setup, lighting, people's glasses would see through it, for example, but he perfected this illusion with Odyssey. And I think that's one thing that people should know about that is these it's the same optical illusion that is in Earth Monkey, but elevated to a new level in which it is perfected. Okay, so Odyssey would be my next piece in it. And what's great about Odyssey is that it doesn't require the lighting setup. You just have to do it the right way. And I have to and now so how do I justify for a Vince Wilson show? All right, because I did love this piece a lot. I talk about the power of glamour. Okay. The not the glamour, the superficial sort of aspect we know today in regards to beauty magazines, but glamour in the time of fables and folklore. The feel of energy and aura that encapsulates a fantasy being, let's say a vampire, a demon, a Bitcoin bro, this these sorts of, narcissistic, aspects of, that we would say that was influence, and sometimes people would think they were aliens, for example, just to manipulate people. And I bring a volunteer on stage and said, "When you're done with this, you will be more immune to the power and influence of glamour than when you started." And I would just wave my hand a little bit, snap my fingers, and so you're now influenced with the power of glamour. Everything you see in this magazine I have right here, you can see it's a flip through, it's a travel magazine. And I'll say this, so you may have seen this in the back of airplane seats, and they give this away for free, or at least they didn't say anything when I walked off the plane with it. Um, and I would just show them some articles from Milan and such and such. And I would say, I said, so we're going to flip through this. And everything you think you say is something everything you think you see is something that I say you saw, even if you didn't see what you think you saw. Does that make sense? And they'll say, no. If you I said, yeah, good. If you said yes, I'd be worried. And I flipped through the magazine and I say, the first image is of a woman who's experiencing the opposite of what the words say. I just want you to focus on the top of the advertisements, the advertisements in here. The first thing you see is the opposite of what the words say the woman is experiencing. And she looks frazzled, and it says something along the lines of, I am so delighted, you know. And the audience, of course, is seeing something completely different because she has been mesmerized by the power of glamour. So that's a way of making that make sense for me, but also using real world objects. Okay. Whenever possible, I try not to use anything that looks like it came from a magic shop. I do not like using things that look like they're like you bought it off the shelf at a brick and mortar or online, the painted, boxes or things along those lines. So this was a great piece I really enjoyed doing.
Well, I think that's a great list so far. And what I think is really interesting as well is how you're taking something that is inherently not a bizarre trick like Odyssey. I would say that's kind of a pseudo hypnotic mentalism piece, I guess. And you're making it play for your needs in your bizarre show.
A lot of great bizarre magic or storytelling magic is repurposed mentalism. Instead of your incredible psychic powers, your Sherlockian genius, or the I combine the five senses to create the illusion of a sixth sense, that sort of pattern. It is you're getting aid from the realm of spirits or fairy tale places or things like that. I sometimes these pieces can be repurposed for other, like for example, during St. Patrick's Day, a lot of these will be repurposed for a show about fae and fairies and things like that. And St. Patrick's Day is huge in the United States for some reason, and probably alcoholism, and the uh, I will do a show called Fairy Tales to Tell in the Dark for St. Patrick's Day, in which it has that, and a lot of these pieces will be just retooled slightly, in which instead of ghosts or psychic ability or whatnot, it's fairy lore if they breathe into it. So most of my ancestry is European. In fact, all my ancestry is European, obviously. So that kind of leans into probably what we're at three pieces now, right?
Yeah.
Four.
So we're moving on to number four. So we have the Okito doll, we have the tea trick Odyssey, and now number four.
After the Odyssey, here's another thing is I try to avoid pieces that a lot of other magicians do. And I think a lot of magicians try to do that. And I definitely want to do that. And I don't want to do it the same way they're doing it. Um, I recently incorporated the Prestige, which is the accordion uh, plastic pieces, which is a great effect. And I hated doing that to some degree because so many magicians are doing it. But I also realized that for when I do shows for private events, they're seeing me do it for the first time. Okay. They've never seen it before. I'm overthinking it because magicians do it. But once again, I had to make that make sense for my type of show. So when I do so if you're anyone who's familiar with the Prestige, it's cards that are numbered usually 1 through 5. I have the version that has the dry erase marker ability on the back of it. Okay. The one criticism I would have Prestige, the cards are great, the effect is great. The flimsy accordion plastic it comes from is not great, so I actually remade that with hard shell plastic of uh, covers I found on Amazon, and taped them together and made it look as nice as I could, so they can tramp better and not because if my opinion of that is I didn't even use it because I knew even in 6 shows it'd be falling apart. But so um so anyway, how I repurposed that for one of my shows is that I talk about the concept in alchemy called equivocal exchange. All right. And I'll say to the audience, have you ever heard the concept of alchemy? For alchemy. By the way, a little thing you can Google later, Sir Isaac Newton practiced alchemy. A lot of people don't know that. All right. Have you ever heard of a concept of alchemy? Sometimes in when I have work perform for younger audiences and nerdier communities, several people raise their hand. I'll just point at them and say "nerd" because they've heard about it from anime. So, all right. But so that's a great moment, nerd. But I relate with them completely. So anyway, uh, but the equivalent has changed. The idea is this: if you want to practice dark or deep magic, you must give to the universe. If you give to the universe, you take something back. Equivocal exchange. If you take from the universe, you must give something back. And the more you give to the universe, the more you can take. Alchemists was used as concept in order to acquire wealth and power and magical ability. All right. If you volunteer for this, you I will gain magical ability, wealth, and power, and well, your family anyway, can say that you participated. All right. So I'd be a volunteer on stage and go through the motions. And of course, I'm using the version it's called Hug Kill. And I didn't want to do this. I thought I love this routine. I didn't want to do this because Rob Zabrecki does it. And I don't want I love Rob Zabrecki. I've met him several times. I've talked to him on the phone before. And I would not ever want to offend him by doing anything that he does. But then I found out he didn't come up with the hug killer concept, and I was okay doing it now. So and my routine is completely different from what he does, other than it's saying hug kill in the back. So that's all the other thing as well. I try not to do any magic my friends perform publicly. For example, I wouldn't do this at a venue like the Chicago Magic Lounge or the Magic Castle because I know my friends have performed routines like that there. So, um, that would be number 4, I suppose.
So have you played about with putting other concepts in there other than hug and kill?
Yes, I've thought about that. Now this is a new addition to my repertoire. I've only had it for a couple of months, and I have been fooling around with a few ideas of other than hug and kill. I definitely do. I would recommend this to everyone. I definitely tend to be super awkward with a hug, and I just kind of do a shoulder pat, like they cover the hug because it is awkward. And you had in today's modern world, you do have to be very cognizant of boundaries and that kind of awkwardness. Some people just want to go in for the full hug, and that's fine. Whenever possible, I just go with a sideways sort of shoulder pat, and that's enough. And I think everyone should do something similar, not go in for the full hug. It's just weird, and that sort of thing. Um, but I have thought about at least switching. I think the kill effect is great, the kill word, but I've been thinking about switching hug with something else like a gift, like maybe a rubber ducky that I give away, or something along those lines. Just something that's humorous and fun. And I can switch the words around. So that's an idea I've been thinking about. Yes.
Amazing.
And
Well, let's go on to number 5 then. So what's in your 5th spot?
the fifth spot, I would like to. There's a lot of volunteering. I don't want to use too many volunteers, so you got to do something. Uh, um, that self works. The Okito doll is one that works by itself, and that's great. So I'll probably switch to another self-working piece. And what I mean by self-working specifically, I'm talking about something that does not need a volunteer to come up. Okay, it can be sleight of hand, but it definitely doesn't need a volunteer. At this point, I would switch to effect called it's normally called the Witches of Glastonbury. Witches of Glastonbury is an effect that was developed by Brother Shadow, a bizarre magician of the past, and taken to another notch with some improvements on it by Paul Prater, who you have met at the recently at the East Coast Spirit Sessions. Um, and Witches of Glastonbury is a color changing Monty effect, if you're familiar with that. Okay, so there's tapered tarot cards in this case, in which you have at the beginning, it appears you have two Wheel of Fortune cards and a death card. And you tell us now. I changed the wording around to where I'm at. In the United States, I'll in uh, New Orleans is where the place takes place. All right, where the story takes place. And if I was in UK, I would just do Glastonbury again because that makes sense. And if I performed in Italy, it would be, Florence or something along those lines, some place where that would make sense for that to happen. Um, and it tells a story of a woman who lived on the outskirts of town. All right, she grew. It was just a very long time ago. First of all, and she lived on the outskirts of town. She was 26 years old. He was unmarried. She helped people for and asked for nothing in return. She grew herbs and plants for medicinal value. Obviously, she was a witch. At least that's what the townspeople thought. You the mayor of the town didn't believe in such nonsense. He was a learned man, after all. He had gone to university. I know it's hard to believe today, a learned politician. Um, but he would go to the outskirts of town and um, uh, visit this woman and flaunt this nonsense about witchcraft and magics. And it's obviously she knew who he was. And they had a nice conversation. He was about to leave and turned around on his um, heel because he remembered that her mother was very wise and perhaps some of that wisdom had transferred onto her. And he thought, I've been thinking, Adam, of buying some land on the outskirts of town, but around here it's very marshy, and I'm not sure this was a good investment or not. Um, and and she said, I think I can help. She goes into her bureau and she pulls out three tarot cards and she shows it to the mayor. A Wheel of Fortune card, another Wheel of Fortune card, and a death card. She said, don't be scared of the death card. It simply means if you choose this, do not buy the land. He absentmindedly starts shuffling up cards. It says, you have two choices, Mr. Mayor. Two choices and two choices only. If you get a Wheel of Fortune card, buy the land. If you get the death card, do not. Now, the problem was the mayor he was a gambling man. He knew how to follow cards. He was positive he only needed to follow the death card. He needed to know where that was so he could avoid it. So he followed that death card, and he's also pretty sure he saw a T stain on the back. And he started shuffling it up, and he said, the death card's in the bottom. So he chooses the top, and it's a death card. How strange. So don't worry, you get another chance. He starts shuffling up again, and he chooses the middle because he was positive the death card returned at the top. But it was the death card again. Now he's upset. He knew 100% that he had followed that card, and there was a marking on it. There's no way he was wrong. She starts shuffling it up again, absentmindedly, not because he run through his turns, but he reached out and grabs the bottom card anyway, and it's still the death card. He runs back in town and tells everyone she was a witch. And I hold up those three cards. The whole time they were just three cards. And I say, "But then you see, if you're looking for fortune, and all you find is death. It must be the work of the devil." And like you can pass those cards out, they can examine it, and they're not going to find anything. So, yep. So that's another great piece. It also adds a little drama and tension. I usually play some very slow, like dramatic violin music in the background to sort of add tension to the story. There's a little levity in there, of course. And if I do the New Orleans story, I add an accent to the mayor when I do his voice. So
Well, I think that's a really good one. I've not heard of that trick before, or that particular story or handling. I think it's great. Is this something that you would do in a walking situation as well? Because this feels like a really lovely story piece for walk around.
right. In fact, I have done it for walk around, and I did write I don't know if you're familiar with my word called the strolling bazaar. That is actually mentioned in it. Yeah, I add more levity to it when I'm doing walk around, and it becomes sort of a feminist message also, because you're talking about the discrimination women have always experienced. Obviously, we fix all those problems, and nothing like that's ever happen again. Just kidding. Anyway, yeah, obviously that's not true. But yes, it has a very powerful message, and if you can make it more dramatic, or you make it more of a humorous tale of stupid politicians, and backwards thinking, for walk around and strolling for sure. Yes.
Well, I think it sounds like another great choice, and leads us into number six, Vince. So let's go for number six. What's in your sixth spot?
Well, the sixth spot is and for this, it was clearly turning into a very bizarre show. This is probably my bizarre magic show, as a matter of fact. And I do have ones at which these are repurposes strictly for mentalism or or mainstream magic, and just changing the words around a little bit. But the next one would definitely be a book test that ends with um, a Pegasus page. Once again, Pegasus page definitely way overdone at magic conferences. Like you go to a magic conference, you're gonna see an ensemble show where five people have Pegasus pages now. For your audience, the of lay people, you know, the they're seeing it for the very first time. They've never seen anything like that before. So I'll have a leather pouch on stage, and I pull a book from it. In this case, Grim Fairy Tales. If I'm doing this as mentalism as opposed to a storytelling element, I might use a different type of book, and I usually go with Josh Zanman's books, because they have multiple pieces built into it. My advice for everyone: don't do too much in one set. Use different pieces in different shows, because if you do too much from Josh Zammann's book, you diminish the power of those effects, because it becomes obvious it's a trick built into the book. Okay, so that's the first piece of advice for using those books. So because he has tossed out book tests, he has a flash forward effect, he has the Pegasus page, he has multiple other pieces built into some of these books, and the Grim Fairy Tale ones is a great example of that. I obviously, you can see what the draw to Grim Fairy Tales is for me. If I want to do more mentalism and with a little bit of humor, I might say, obviously, when you choose a book for any sort of piece that you're doing in a magic show. You want to avoid something political, something that might entice or have a negative reaction with your audience. So you choose something that has no religious or political connotations. So I chose a science fiction book, for example, 1984, and I hold that up, and the and usually get laughter from the audience because we know that's the opposite of not a political book. um, and and then I might say, obviously, this has nothing to what's might be happening in the world today. In this, and then that's irrelevant because the rest of the thing has nothing to do with the book because you're doing the I use the classic sort of aspect of picking up on you go in two ways of it. If I'm doing a more bizarre magic show and I'm picking up on the aura or feelings or empathy of the audience, if there's more mentalism, then I'm doing the trope of facial readings. Now, there's videos of me online. You can look up if you want to. I actually can do facial readings for real to some degree. It's I don't do it very often because there's a percentage of failure, and no magician likes to fail at a magic piece or mentalism piece on stage. All right, but it is a but it is something that is in my repertoire. Why do that when Zandman's book can let you cheat? Okay, even the flash forward effect. So I tell them um, some advice for people ever doing it: do not put emphasis on the book. Don't let them examine it. Don't offer it to them, even though it claims it's examinable. When you do that, it's like a splinter in the brain. You're telling them the book could be hinky. Something that could be possibly up weird about the book, and they'll want to look at it again or over-examine it. Just don't suggest that. It's unnecessary pattern. All right. If I even mention the book, it's because the book is important to the story, or I want to get some levity in there, like the 1984 reference. But Grimm fairy tales make sense because it has witchcraft and you know fairy tale creatures and metaphors and parables inside of it that makes sense with the for the concept I'm trying to convey. It also is a book that goes into my fairy tales that tell in the dark show for obvious reasons. Okay, so I just do the flip it back, look at the word, and I can say that I can pick up on their reactions to the word. It's either their aura is lighting up or dimming, or when I'm picking up micro expressions, or I want to go to a more mentalism effect. And I do try to pick up on stuff because a lot of times if their partner was with them, they'll look at their face because they're trying to pick up on what they're reacting to as well. So if I see them squint or curl their lips or something like that, I'll mention, you curled your lips briefly. It's a first letter is G, right? you know, for example, and I will go by two fingers or two letters. And I'm gonna try to figure out how many letters are in that word. Two, three, four, not four letters. You raise the eyebrows just slightly, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll tell them what I'm doing and how it works. It's the reason we take the first word top of the page is because um, for verification purposes. Make sense? And that's it. That's all I say. They'll always agree it makes sense for whatever reason, you know, for verification purposes, and then we move on. And then I'll say at the end, I said, the second reason I choose the first word top of the page is because I memorized 95% of the words on that side of the book. And they laugh because they think, like, oh, that's cheating almost. But then I say, listen, think about it. I used to toss the book out, let them choose any word. But my first book was Alice in Wonderland that I memorized or used, and the problem was that they would make these fantasy words or foreign words I didn't know, and it would take forever. With this, I could usually figure out two letters, and now they're totally sold that what I'm doing is real. So that's my advice for anyone who does this effect, you know. Um, and then that'll transition into a Pegasus page. I play some music in the background, and I will say, if I'm doing a full bizarre magic show, I'll say spooky music's playing in the background, like a sort of mystical sounding music, and I'll say, "Have you ever walked in the woods at night, your bare feet in the grass? Have you ever felt the full moon empower you? All right, there's energy coming from the earth, and you feel." energized, if you as if you can do impossible things, And it's always a woman who'll respond to this, you know? And they'll come up on stage. I said, "Is that you may have been born, you know, uh, different. It's possible that witch blood exists in your ancestry." Um, I do a Pegasus page, and the page disappears. It appears inside the leather folder that was on stage the entire time with the flap open, and the page matches up, and the audience is amazed. This I think this part is necessary to have a real justification for why that page disappears. Because one, in general, it should be there for a Pegasus page, and two, if I'm using two pieces from the same book, it definitely needs to have a justification. Otherwise, they know the book is a trick. You don't want them to think that book is a trick. I'm very big on stage decor as well. I usually bring a couple of velvet tablecloths with tassels on them in order to decorate the existing tables in the venue, or the private residence or place I'm performing at. I also have foldable tables. I even have a similar backdrop, which is in better condition than this one, and I like to have that so I can do something like this. Like, they think the book is fake. They think the bookcase is not fake, but it isn't, as you can see. No, I definitely have, real books loaded up on there. I do that's another piece I will add to my show, usually, when I wanna do the book test. Then it's not so you can consider that a separate effect, even though it leads into the book test.
That's great. If you're only listening to this audibly, you can watch this on YouTube. And basically, Vince has behind him a backdrop which has seen better days, and it is a bookshelf, and he has just managed to produce a book from said fake bookshelf. So yeah, that's brilliant. It's such a great idea. I bet that moment when you pull it out of the wall is really funny as well.
It's just a brilliant illusion. I came up with that, during the Zoom era, during the pandemic. I was doing it for Jeff McBride's mystery school, and I just came over with that on the fly. Just said, someone asked, "Is that bookcase that is this is when it was new?" They just said, "Is that bookcase a curtain or a zoom effect?" And I said, "Oh, it's a real bookcase." And I just had to grab the random book off my desk and just came back and did that, and it worked. And that was just improvised right there. And then later, of course, I realized it can be done on stage. So now I just keep it in my jacket under my shoulder, and I pull it out and reveal it from it, hiding it behind my forearm and fingers there. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that's another great choice in at number six, and leads us to the tail end of your eight with number seven. So, what's in your seventh spot?
at this point, I could probably do my tossed out tarot deck. Okay. The toss out deck is always a wonderful, wonderful piece for any magic show or mentalism piece. And it goes for both. I don't do a lot of, I know how to do card magic to some degree. Every magician should know that, even if you're not specializing in it. Um, and, uh, and I do a tossed out tarot deck because it makes more sense for me, you know. And this is a very big piece. It doesn't need a lot of, uh, s storytelling aspects. First of all, I think this one was developed by Card Shark years ago, if you're familiar with it. It's an aged, tarot deck, and it has the force words written, in German and English. Okay, so if you depending on your orientation, you'll get one or the other. And the orientation of where you put the rubber band on. Okay, I use a bungee cord around it because rubber bands rot and break and that sort of thing, and I don't want to carry around a bag of rubber bands all the time. So I just put a bungee cord, which will last for years, on it, and I put it in a wooden box. And I said I made some predictions earlier, and I would like to, demonstrate this with you. This is a very quick piece. This is meant to be fast because it's very little storytelling. The story is in the cards. Okay, they are tarot cards. Okay, and I fanned them out in front of the front row, which is a ballsy move because if you're a magician, you will definitely see how this is done. All right, I don't fan them out a lot, just enough so you get the edges of the cards. Okay, um, and but if you were looking for it, if you knew how it worked in advance, you would definitely see what how it worked because it's multiples of same cards. Uh, I rubber banded up again, and I said, I just want you to pass this out to maybe 5 people. Now, this is an old deck, and they're in an order, and if they and every once in a while, it rarely happens, but sometimes I don't want anyone to get the same card, even though it's 78 cards, but it can happen because they bend in the same places and such. So the first person to look at it, you're the top, second person about a third of the way down, and so on and so forth. Okay. And I'll walk you through it. And that's what they say. You only get one chance. If you miss your opportunity, just pass off to someone else. Don't feel bad. It happens. All right. Boom, 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 5 times. I call out the predictions and that was written inside the wooden box I have, and it's done. You know. So it's a very nice piece, and I could it's another piece I could do to extend it. If I don't decide not to do that, I do who done it, which is a clue routine. And sometimes I'll flip that with um the test, and it leads one into the other, which I can say, which I can know how I did that because it uses the idea that you can read micro expressions and things like that. And I usually play like jazzy film noir sort of music, background music, as I try to play the part of the detective and find out what like killer this person would be. All right. So if you it used for it's uses clue cards or Cluedo cards, depending on where you're coming from. And it's a when done right, it's a brilliant piece and can add a lot of levity and fun. I suggest if you do it, have some degree of improvisational skills. It makes it way better. Every magician should take improv classes, in my opinion. So that is those two pieces are interchangeable. I would do either one of those right before my last piece. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I think is really interesting about tossed out tarot as well is it can essentially be a Q and a very short
Yeah,
Q&A, because you
100%.
can reveal things about people that there is no way that you could know. Because, of course, using the tossed out tarot method, you can effectively say anything you want, and the audience will confirm that you are correct.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. You're a master of cold reading. Uh, because you're absolutely correct because using Barnum phrases and cold readings, and if you don't know what those are, you should because they really add to any sort of piece because uh, rarely are you going to get. The only times I've ever seen that go wrong is when you have like the most vile narcissistic jerk, for lack of a better. There's better words I could use, but you get the idea. What keep this podcast clean? Narcissistic jerk who's so self-aware of the fact that they're a total piece of you know what. The that's the only time, and then of course you're still gonna win because you just outed this awful person. So it's not a big deal. But yeah, for the most part, you're rarely gonna meet someone who doesn't want to think they're a good person, and the Barnum phrases and lines you use are going to work flawlessly on that. There's things along the lines of you've been taken advantage of before because of your kind personality. You've had people betray you and that sort of thing. And you definitely are the kind of person who would help someone in need, things along those lines. And you can go to other places, relationships and parents and things along those lines. Those are just the baseline things you can do with that. Uh, and you can find out a lot about a person. And their behavior on stage even reveals information about them. They're an introvert or an extrovert. Those things that come across when you bring someone up on stage, for example. And you use that to your advantage as well. The clue routine brings all that out as well. It's just like that's why to me they're interchangeable because you're trying to figure out what kind of killers would be by finding out what kind of person they are. You know. A joke I usually add into it to add some levity to it is, I said, "Oh, Jamie here has a browser history that needs to be deleted." That he reads those kinds of books, you know? And, for example, and probably most people read those kind of books, so they don't like to be but it's a funny piece that's out, and if they deny it, you're like, "Of course you're denying it," for example, so, yeah. Those are yeah, it's a good suggestion, Jamie.
Well, I think it's a great choice in at number seven, and very sadly leads us to number eight, which is your final choice. So, what would you put in your last position, Vince?
That's easy. My spin on the PK touch routine, alright? Usually I try to get a couple, like a romantic couple. Every great once in a while, I'm performing for some place where it's no couples night. It's corporate gigs and stuff like that are usually like that. So I'll bring up a two good friends or coworkers or something like that. All right. Um, and I start with a standard, what is most people refer to as bandage check style PK touch routine, and and I want to be just very clear, for advice for magicians, keep it simple. Don't overdo it. Right? As soon as you over verify things, and they know it's a trick now. You keep it simple, it's a miracle. The worst PK touch routines I've seen, in the United States anyway, is where it's like it's too much. You're sitting down, you're standing up, it's a feather, it's a nose, it's like it's a back and forth over and over again for minutes. It's like those 12 15-minute egg bag routines you see sometimes. Oh my God. It's like, come on. Now we know it's the bag, you know. It's funny, it's fun, everyone's laughing, but we know it's the bag now. All right. So the peak touch routines should be simple. So what I usually do is bring a couple up on stage, back and forth with the shoulders, the standard waving your hand sort of thing. And that creating a connection between the two of them. I tell them to think of romantic interludes, wonderful moments spent together, vacations and trips, and things like that. And then, of course, it ends with what many of you have seen before, which is, um, you know, so did you feel anything? Yes, it's because I actually touched you. Everyone saw me touch this person, right? And did you feel anything? And there's like, yes. Is it two touches? Yes. Did everyone together know was did I ever touch this person? No, the audience says. Okay. Now that's amazing in itself. And that's it. I'm done with that. One back and forth, that's it. No more. This part of the show is done. That's it. But wait, there's more. All right. I have a question for you. It's very important. Tell me, of the two of you, who's the most graceful? I put my arm up gracefully like that. Who's the most graceful of the two of you? Right? There's only one answer, and both should know who it is. And usually, it would say your standard heterosexual couple or whatnot. They'll automatically pick the woman amongst the two of them. And they'll be on the stage. So take the center stage, you want it. And then I'll go into what's based on D'Angelo PK touches. Um, so it's Raphael D'Angelo's PK touches are some of the most amazing PK touch routines I've ever seen. Okay, Jamie, you also have great PK touch. I love watching a demonstration at ECSS. So I definitely want to give you a shout out as well. All right. But what's great about D'Angelo, you only need one volunteer. If I don't have couples and if I need to speed it up because maybe it went over or they're telling me to cut back on time or something like that, I can just cut to one person and call it a day. All right. Um, the what most magicians don't do this because it's too ballsy for them. When they learn how to do it, they watch the videos that they can buy online. It's like it's been out for a while now, so it's usually very inexpensive to buy. The Angelo touches. Okay. But they'll watch those videos and say, I can't do that. There's no way this will work. I mean, obviously it works because people do it. But they'll look at those videos and say it's impossible. They'll try it at home and they'll try it with their partner or whatnot with their friends, and they'll give it. I've actually seen him get bad reviews on the platforms and the sites that there's been downloads available on because It's too ballsy for a lot of magicians to perform, which is great for us because we do it. All right. So, but it is a so when I end with that piece, I add my own flair to it. I make a lot of emphasis to be as far away from the person. I make sure the touches are extremely light. I also another word I would give to anyone taking on PK touches in the modern world is I always very quickly and simply ask for consent at the beginning. When I say the line, you're in a moment, you're gonna feel a touch, a very light touch, and that's "Is that okay?" That's it, that's all I say. I don't put an emphasis on it and say, "Is that okay?" I go back and forth, "Is that okay?" I get consent from both of them, and it's very quick moment. "Is that okay?" "Good." And we're done. You always 100% of the time say yes because they already came up on stage for this. All right? Um, so it's never an issue. Is that okay? Good. Now everyone's happy. Okay. But then you can just do the PK touch routines that you need to do as long as you stay in the parameters that you established already. So, and then I do the Piangela PK touch routine, and that is the most powerful closer I've ever done. Someone, I'm not going to say names, and I'm sure they're going to listen to this podcast later once I now, when you promote it. But I once, someone once asked me to open their show with that routine. All right. And I asked if he was sure he wanted me to do that. And he said, I'm 100% sure. And I tried to talk him out of it. And he insisted on me opening with it. And it wasn't, I want to put emphasis on this is not me bragging or being arrogant. All right. It is the fact that this is a closer and a powerful one. If you do it right, anyone who does it is going to have a very powerful closer for their show. But he asked me to open his show for it with it. All right. And his show could not recover from the energy that was established because of that PK touch routine, because they were completely different styles of performance, for one thing, going into a very funny, humor show with a lot of concepts I'm sure you're familiar with, that will not have should not have followed that kind of closing material. All right. Has ever seen something like this happen before? It's great. The energy I established could not be maintained the rest of the show. Is what I was trying to say. Yeah. But that's how I would have ended the show. That would be the on the desert island performance, which I'm be performing for coconuts painted like people. That is the show I would do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I was over at ECSS, we spoke about PK touches. I think
Yes.
we both had very much the same view on it. I still think it's the best trick. People have heard my Desert Island list now. They know that that was my number one. If I was to perform one trick for the rest of my life, it would be PK touches. And I think there are very few tricks in our industry that require no props. And if you are going to use a prop, the one prop that you do use is an invisible prop. It's not a thing that people are aware of, and it doesn't feel like mind reading. It doesn't feel like a trick. It feels like something else. I think there are very few tricks in our industry that feel like this.
Yeah, there's gonna be moments in which you don't want to perform magic. Someone knows you're a magician, and they're gonna ask you to perform magic, and you can say the excuse, I'm sorry I didn't bring anything with me." I think that's the worst excuse, you know? If you don't want to perform magic, just say, be honest with them and say, "Not right now. I'm enjoying my dinner," or whatever, To be honest with them, okay? Because every single magician should have in their repertoire magic they can do with nothing. And PK Touches is one of those pieces. You know, if you can bring a restaurant into silent awe and then applause with that PK Touch routine. All right. And it's the only thing you have to do, and they think you're a miracle worker. That requires no props, no gimmicks, and things like that. I don't like the electronic PK Touch gadgets. It's too much. It's like you're removing stuff and adding stuff, and it's an unnecessary feat. matter how wonderful the response you got, just a little training from someone who's experienced with PK touches can make you not need to carry that with you, that gadget or gizmo. That PK touches are super powerful. They don't require anything, and I think there's lots of other things you could do, but I think you should definitely have in your arsenal multiple pieces that require no props or anything like that. So you're never in a situation in which you'd have to say, "I didn't bring anything with me." And no magician should say that. You should always have the ability to do magic no matter what. Even if you didn't bring, you should be able to do magic at a nudist colony.
Well, now we know what kind of island we're going to. So we've got a wonderful eight tricks there. We started with Okito Ball, Dull. We've got the Tea Trick. We've got Odyssey, the Prestige, Witches of Glastonbury, Zanman Book Test, Tossed Out Tarot, and PK Touches. Now, Vince, we gave you eight tricks, but you only get one each of your final things. Okay, so you are going to dig a big sandy hole on your island and you're going to throw something inside from our industry. We're going to cover it over, never to be seen again. So, what would you like to banish from our industry?
I would banish published scripts and pattern into the hole and forcing magicians to come up with their own verbiage so it best fits their personality. So from this point on, all the knowledge of things written by other magicians in regards to the things to say, the pattern that comes with the directions, gone. And it would force people to be creative and imaginative. Unfortunately, I would have to throw in ChatGPT in after that. Or the chat box, chat box with it, because I think that's what. Unfortunately, a lot of magicians would probably go there next. How do I make this? What kind of words can I do with this? In the chat software. But that's another story or another show. The but yes, I think the all the patter written by other magicians that have been published and forcing you to come up with your own creative, imaginative verbiage. Because sincerity comes from your words, not from the words from other people. Sincerity connects with people more. And of course, me and you have both put out stuff. We've both published effects and pieces and scripts and things like that. And people definitely perform those pieces as we wrote them. And that's fine because that's why we put them out there in the first place. I would like to see more magicians use their own verbiage. It's like learn the piece first. Like when I get a proper effect, I learn how it's done, and then I'll put my own words over it anyway.
Yep, I agree. And even when I was at ECSS, a shout out to Zeke Powers, who came over to me with one of my own tricks that he had redesigned and repurposed in his own way. And I think that's great. And something that kind of you said earlier on, which I think about a lot, is, and I think I mentioned it before, and it's no slight on anyone at all, but when you go to the Magic Circle in London, there are posters all over the walls of magicians from years past, and they're all doing these incredible things. There's the electrocution chair, there's levitations, there's bringing back the dead, there's all of these incredible things that are happening. And then when you go there on a club night, everyone's sat in the middle of the room with the deck of cards. And that's no slight on anybody, but I think it's really sad how there's no wonder in our industry anymore. And I kind of think that that goes into what you're saying there about the published scripts. I think we're all just doing the same things. No one is brave enough to go out there and do the crazy thing, the wild thing, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I lectured and performed at the Magic Circle a few years ago. Right, and I got there. If they open at 3 o'clock, I wasn't doing my s pieces until 7 o'clock. I got there super I think it was 7 p.m., something like that anyway. It was hours later. They were shocked how early I got there. It's like, "Well, this is the Magic Circle. I don't want I'm gonna be here again, so I want a tour of everything. I wanna see the library." I spent an hour and a half in the library by itself. And they asked me, did I wanna see uh, the auditions that were happening that night? 'Cause this was Tuesday, and they were doing auditions that night. I said, "Oh, 100%." And, and I think I'm more known in Europe than I am in the United States to some degree because of bizarre magic is more better represented in Europe. And I don't know if they were intimidated by me because they recognized my name. I don't think so. I think it was more they knew that I was lecturing that night, and they looked at anyone with that kind of authority as someone they should be nervous about, I guess. And I volunteered for a couple of pieces, and I was thinking about my lecture later that evening. And my lecture that evening, I say these words. It said, being a better magician means being unique. Those were words for sincerity that connects with the audience better. And I used the example. How many times have you heard these words, Jamie? When I was a kid, I had 6 cards. And I'm sorry, I met a magician. When I was a kid, I met a magician. He had 6 cards. He said, one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many times have we heard that? Dozens of times, right? I'm sitting there watching these auditions. I'm thinking about my lecture I'm doing. I'm taking some notes, not with what's going on stage, just reminding myself of what to cover at the Magic Circle lecture. And a kid comes up there and he says, when I was a kid, I saw a magician and he had 6 cards. And I scratched that right out of my notes. And I used a different reference because I felt bad for that kid. But I think enough time has passed that I don't have to worry about that. But but yes, it is it's when you're lecturing, performing conferences, that's something you have to be more weary of. Less so when it comes to private events. But I will say this: the booking agents know those words. Now they don't know that it was Bill Abbott or Scott Alexander or, Jamie Dawes or anyone who wrote the pattern they're performing. They'll know who those are, but they know they've heard those words before. And the booking agents were always looking for, there's places that always just want a magician. It is like every year a magician does great at our event. So we want a magician. But every year they're looking for someone new with different pattern, different verbiage, different ways of presenting themselves. They might want magic, they might want mentalism, and they don't want to hear the same thing again. Think about that. If you're doing original material, you're doing material despite the magic underneath of it that no one's heard before, and therefore they've never seen before. I've performed out of this world in the ensemble shows in which 2 other magicians performed out of this world, and we all did it differently enough that no one put together they were the same effect.
Okay, well, published scripts forcing originality are banished onto your island. So everyone has to be more original. That is everyone out there. Now, that leads us to your book. So I know that you've referenced Eugene a couple of times. So I may think that maybe in your book position, Eugene's in there, but let's find out what is in your book position.
Bro, anything by, uh, Tony Andruzzi as well, okay? So that is difficult. He died in 1991. There's a lot of his materials out there. And I encourage you to watch, if you look up Tony Andruzzi, watch the videos of him performing. He performed for the Secret Cabaret on television back in the 90s or early 90s because he passed away in 91. And I encourage you to watch his energy. If you've ever seen a horror movie host on a late night TV program in the United States, they have this campy energy. They're a vampire or a ghoul or Dr. Frankenstein famous. Of course, the most famous one is obviously Elvira. You know, um, and he had that vibe to him. And a lot of people getting into bizarre magic, they make the mistake of reading that material without understanding the energy behind it. They think it's dry and occult and 70s satanic or something like that. Um, but it could also be fun and energetic and full of storytelling. It doesn't have to deal with spirits and demons. It could be fairy tale creatures or just the concept of magic. There's nothing wrong with making people believe in magic. And I think Tony for me did that. He was also a comedy magician before he went into full on bizarre magic, and he was apparently one of the best of his era, the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
Okay, well, we have Devil's Advocate. He has just popped up because for the first time ever, you've said the name of an author without a specific book. So, if I made you take only one Tony Andrewsy book, which one would you take?
Ah, even his diary, because it encapsulates his character to some degree, more than other materials. It is a very thin pamphlet of a book, mind you, as many of the the self-publications of that era were. Today, we can put out at almost no expense, books that are hundreds of pages thick and have them self-printed. But back then, self-printing meant going onto a typewriter and then having it Xeroxed or copied at the at an office supply store. But I think the character that Andrewsy was comes across in the Demon's Diary possibly more than the other materials he did. Another book that you could say he's featured in as an alternative would be the Vocational, which is an enormous book. It is, but it's not definitively a Tony Andresi book because it also has other authors, including Max Maven and Eugene Berger and some of the other greats of magic and mentalism from that time period. It was originally a series of magazines or newsletters that came out as pamphlet form, and then in Ghost, and now it is you can get these in two volumes, volumes 1 and 2, come in one gigantic thick book. Actually, it's right behind this curtain if I tore it down. And volume 3 is about a third that size, and it has you have the complete vocational. The 3 is hard to find, but you can always get 1 and 2 someplace.
Okay, so Demon's Diary is going with you, and that leads
Yes.
us to the last thing, Vince. So, you're allowed to take one non-magic item that you use for magic. So, what would you take?
Chinese fortune coins. Alright, so I actually have it in my pockets always. Always, always, always. Hold on. Alright. This is a Chinese fortune coin, okay? For those who can't see it, just Google it online. It's a Chinese fortune coin. It's standard, 1 inch in the imperial sizing method. Alright, it's a, brass coin, circular with a square hole in the middle, okay? You've seen these in cartoonishly large, thick sizes for magic tricks over the years, but this is usually what you get at Chinese New Year. You can buy this by the hundreds at very low cost. Okay. And during Chinese New Year, these are thrown into the audience and given away in pouches and things like that. Okay. Um, I always have these with me because they're very inexpensive. They're relatively easy to bend. Okay. And I do a coin switch for people. This is my go-to sort of on to run, but here's a quick magic piece for you. And I'll ask you to put their hand out like this. I put the, and I'll say, I want you to put your, first I'll say, so I want you to examine this and I'll give it back to me. Now that put it back, put it in your hand like this. And of course, let's see, hold on for a second. I'll do this properly for you. There we go. Okay. So, um, I'll put it back in your, I say, I'll put this in your hand. I'll put it back in your hand like that. And when I put this back in your hand, you're going to make a fist around it. And there's the coin right there. And I'll put it in their hand like that. They make a fist around it like that. Okay. And I'll say, if there's several directions to go to, this is also my go-to. If there's kids around, I rarely perform with kids. But when I do, this is my go-to big kids routine. I'll say, think of your favorite superhero. I turn your hand around and the coin is bent. All right. These coins are, obviously, you know how that worked. So I'm not telling you anything that's you've never seen before. But it's a great quick routine. It's very simple, very inexpensive. For giving a trick that you give away. All right. it's very, it adds up to start giving away, even, relatively inexpensive coins, and coins are kind of real coins that we use for transactions are kind of going to away slowly but surely. Very few people use them, and these are you can buy this in bulk. 200 1-inch coins. I don't really recommend anything smaller. Make sure it is at least that size. 200 of these you can get for $20 US. Uh, and it'll last you weeks or months before you run out of them and have to recharge. And it's just so worth it to give that away to someone, let them keep it. And I'll say, well, you ruined my coin. If as a kid, I'll say, is to think of your favorite superhero, easy one, if it's an adult and I want to go through, there's, all sorts of different verbiage you can say, I want to channel all your energy into your hand. I want you to think of, to someone who made you angry recently, someone who upset you. We're going to alleviate you of that stress and anxiety and transfer it into that coin, which is made out of brass and is a relatively okay material for channeling energy, and then it's bent in half, so and it's keep it now. I don't want that. It's cursed, so yep. Yeah. So that's yeah, that's a good it's technically not a magic piece, but it's something you can use for magic, yes.
Amazing. Well, that's one that we've definitely not had before. We may never have again. So I really, really like it. So one more time, your list was the Akito doll, the Tea Trick Odyssey, the Prestige, Witches of Glastonbury, the Zaman book test, Tossed Out Tarot, PK Touches. Your banishment was published scripts. Your book was the Demon's Diary, and your item is Chinese fortune coins. What a great, very bizarre list, Vince.
Thank you, thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
So, if people want to find out more about you, your books, and of course the Pose Magic Conference, where can they go to, Vince?
For me, if they just want to find out about me, you can go to vincewilsonmagic.com. All right. Or the books in the UK, very soon, I understand, you can go to alakazam.com. In the US, you can go to stevensmagic.com and so a couple other different ones, but that's the one I know of off the top of my head. And there, if you want to read some of my new news material as it comes out, I suggest you go to my Substack, which is something I started a couple of months ago, and I have over 50 articles on magic, mentalism, performance, and storytelling. Some original materials that were published, stuff I put out before. There's a minor subscription of there's a 7-day trial. You can just try out, see if you like it, get to read everything up to date for free. It's only $5 a month if you decide to subscribe to it, but there's lots and lots of free material out there. In fact, I'm probably giving away way too much free material. Honestly, I should be charging for it, all of it. But I do like the message of storytelling and how important that is, and incorporating into it. So I put a lot of that out there for free for that reason. All right, so you go to Substack.com and you look up Vince Wilson Magi, and I'll come up right away.
And do you do lectures, Vince?
Oh yes, yeah. On storytelling, on magic, on mentalism, bizarre, of course. I have a lot of experience on it, knowledge of how to. And I try to uh, convey to anyone who listens the ways and methods of making your magic better. Not telling you that you have to be bizarre, but basically explaining how storytelling, narrative, and meaning and magic can make your performances better. You'll probably be a better magician than me if you listen to those lectures very easily, as a matter of fact. Posemagic.com. POESMAGIC.com. And I did that from memory. I didn't have to read it. Posemagic.com is where you can find information about the conference. It is a conference for storytelling magicians. And even if you don't want to delve deeply into storytelling magic, it's a conference that'll help you have better magic shows. The show, the actual show, not the tricks, the show. It'll tell you how to do that better. And there's very few conferences, if any, that focus on that.
Amazing. So there you go. Get your tickets and head down there. Thank you so much, Vince, for your time.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It was wonderful being on here. It's great to talk to you again, too.
Very much so. And of course, thank you all for listening. Do go check out Vince's books. I have two of his books. So I have the Houdini Seance, which is all about his very popular Houdini Seance, and I have Bizarre Magic. Both of them are not only jam-packed with absolute gems, but they're beautifully produced. We are hoping to get Bizarre Magic in Alakazam very shortly as well. So do keep an eye out on that if you're in the UK. Of course, if you're in America, you can go to Stephen's Magic as well. So please do go check that out. And of course, we will be back next week with a version of Desert Island Tricks. So have a great week, everyone. Goodbye.
Hey everyone, Emilio here from Print by Magic, and I want to tell you all about the incredible service we are now offering here at Alakazam Magic. We can print any design you like onto premium bicycle card stock. Want a custom back deck to give your Magic a more professional feel? Need personalized decks as a wedding gift or corporate giveaway? Or maybe you've created a new trick and need custom gaff cards with altered pips or faces. We can do all of that, and unlike most printers, there's no minimum order. Whether you'd like one card, one full deck, or multiple decks, we've got you covered. Some of the biggest names in Magic already use Print by Magic, so if you've got an idea, we'd love to bring it to life. Head over to Print by Magic and let's make your dream deck a reality. Thanks guys.